3, 2, 1.
Yeah, hello. We are here for a webinar together with Custodigit and GFT. Today we will talk about asset tokenization in generally, but also with a specific focus on tokenization of art and art pieces. And therefore, I think, directly go into the introduction round, where I would like to ask everybody here in the call to quickly present himself and last point, we have Peter here from Custodigit. Custodigit is one of the prime custody providers in Switzerland. And we have David here and Julian from GFT Technologies, which is basically an IT company, but we will hear more details. What exactly are you doing in the fields of blockchain? And interestingly, and that's also what I like a little bit with this Corona style webinars, we are sitting somewhere on the world, right? Distributed across Europe, which is very nice. Technology appears to work very well. And I think with this, let's start directly to the topic. I think tokenization is an upcoming topic. Tokenization means that you are taking some kind of asset and packaging this in form of a token, such that it can then be run on a blockchain system, with the implication that you can move, for example, property on an art piece around the world within 1 minute, to speak very illustratively. You could also package, so to say, the euro, then you would have the tokenized euro. You could tokenize ownership of an art piece. You can tokenize shares. You could, in the future, tokenize everything. But of course, it takes a while. And I think right now, especially with Liechtenstein and Switzerland leading the way in Europe, we can see that now companies are really starting to operatively tokenize all kinds of assets which are out there. This is what we would like to talk about. We have a couple of people here in the call who are from Germany. I think this should also open up the mind of Germans, because in Germany, we so far focusing on the tokenization of debt. That's the Schuldverschreibungen. But from a Switzerland perspective, it's also possible to tokenize equity, which can also be very, very interesting. So therefore, this should also open up our mind a little bit. And therefore, I'm also very happy that we have Custodigit here with a Swiss footprint to also tell us what's going on in Switzerland, because their tokenized tokens can also rely on equity and so on. Okay, let's do this introduction room. Peter, would you like to present yourself and your company briefly?
Thank you very much, Philipp, and thank you very much for having me. So my name is Peter Hoffmann. I'm founder and CEO of Custodigit. Custodigit actually is a digital asset platform for regulated financial service provider. In short, I make it quite easy. We are a core banking, like a core banking system, but for digital assets. So we provide all the business functionality a bank needs in order to execute their processes in a safe, secure, and efficient manner.
Excellent. Then let's go over to GFT, and therefore I would like Julian to present himself and also GFT briefly.
Sure. So my name is Julien. I am currently sitting in the mountains in Switzerland, as you can see from my background. And I'm conducting projects here in Zurich and in Liechtenstein for banks, mainly in the tokenization space. And personally, I'm also a crypto enthusiast since years and years. So I have great fun discovering every day something new in the space.
Perfect. And David, please also present yourself briefly.
So I'm David Krier. I'm GFT's global DLT and crypto lead. I sit in Barcelona, but as you can tell, I don't really have a Spanish accent. So I'm originally from London, and I've been working in the innovation space in GFT for the past 6 years now, and exclusively in DLT and crypto for the past 5 years. Maybe just a little bit about what we have done in that area more generically before we jump into the tokenization discussion. But GFT has been involved in DLT and crypto since 2014. We've done around 30 different projects, a lot of the time focused on banking, so tier 1 banks, exchanges, and also some insurers as well we've been working with. Maybe up until about the last 3 years ago, when we got the changes in regulation, we weren't really very focused on crypto assets. So we're more focused on securities, tokenization of securities, for example, rather than actual crypto itself. And then more recently, in the last 3 years or so, we've started to partner with companies like Custody who are providing, institutional crypto for our clients. So yeah, I suppose that's a little bit of background about what we do. And GFT is a technology services provider, as you said before. We're about 6,000 people strong. We're headquartered in Stuttgart, so not too far down the road from where you are. But we're a multinational, and we're basically present in most geographies across the globe.
Excellent, very nice. Yeah, let's jump directly into the topic. Maybe Peter, let's first talk about some general remarks with regard to tokenization. So how would you define this topic of tokenization is in particular focusing on let's call it asset token, security token. Some people also say investment token. What is it?
So thank you very much. Right. What I see that the token is representing, or this digital twin, actually is twofold from my perspective. It is representing ownership, as you mentioned in the introduction, or to be a little bit broader, a right in the end. So from our perspective, it is really a digital twin, which represents, as mentioned before, the ownership or a certain right. That could be an equity, that could be an art piece, or some other kind of real world asset. What we are sorry?
No, I just wanted to focus on the topic of a digital twin of an asset. I've never heard this example to illustrate tokenization, but of course it makes very much sense. Yeah, but sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. That's how we call it, right? The digital twin. Maybe different terms are used out there. But we are at GFT and Custody currently in a project that's on the tokenization of art, which is a little bit an edge case, I would say. Not a lot of people are talking about those cases. Although I have to admit, I was even working, when was it, 5 years ago already, on tokenization of art, but maybe with a slightly different motivation. But it's an old case relatively, but it's a case where you do actually have a real world value out of the tokenization. That's a little bit the tricky part in my point of view in tokenization. Everybody is looking for the killer use case where you really have a lot of value or benefits out of tokenization. And the art case is, from that perspective, quite interesting because you have immediate benefits out of it.
Based on the transparency, the fractionalization, and all the other things, we will talk about this in a second. So let's dig a little bit more into this, Peter and David, maybe. How does tokenization in specific works? And then also focusing about the life cycle. Which life cycle can we observe? How does a token be generated? How will it be traded? And so on. So how does it work? Maybe Peter, you could maybe start if you wish.
So from a technical perspective, I would leave that to Julia and David. I guess that's more their domain. But if you have a look, so making really the digital twin, that's the first step, the issuance, the token creation first, which is really an important part. And then it's also the question, as we said before, because it is a digital twin, what's happening with the real world asset? That has to be secured in a way as well, so that not any fraud or misuse can happen with that. And then, of course, as a next step is then the distribution of the tokens, right? Where you need to have investors or other parties where actually those tokens are taking. And after that, then the asset management or asset servicing is happening, which is highly dependent on the underlying asset class itself. If you're talking about equity, you have all those votings, for example. If you talk about art, then you do have transfer sales on a secondary market.
Yeah, I think that's a very good explanation of how tokenization in general works. And let's now dig a little bit deeper and ask once again, David, about the life cycle. How are tokens born or minted? What happens then? How are they traded, and so on?
Yeah, so the tokenization lifecycle is effectively that you need to define the token in a smart contract. So usually, I suppose the majority of tokens of these days are using Ethereum smart contracts, so defined in Solidity smart contracts themselves. So you define the actual token itself via a smart contract, and deploy that smart contract to the Ethereum network, which gives it I suppose the framework for what the token will look like when you decide to actually transact a token in this type of framework itself. And then once you have deployed that smart contract onto the Ethereum network using one of the standards, so if that's like ERC 1400, so like a securities token, or whether it's like that's a non-fungible token or an ERC20 token, then you can then use that to be able to create a transaction on top of that, which basically effectively mints the token itself and kind of creates the tokenization of the asset, and for example changes the, let's say if it's the case of a changing of ownership, then changes the ownership of the particular piece of art that it's representing itself.
Yeah, I think that's a very good explanation. I would perfectly agree. And maybe one remark here which could be added, we typically talk about tokenization of art and assets, but ultimately it's tokenization of one specific right or one specific asset. So in case you're tokenizing an art piece or a company or securities, you might end up with an entire set, an entire bundle of tokens, right? But this might also go a little bit too deep, or we can discuss it later. Yeah, so how does this digital twin thing work? Maybe David, or also Julien, if you wish. How does this work? How can you basically bring a real world asset which you can touch into the blockchain? How do you tokenize it? How do you reconcile the physical world and the token world?
So if I may, I think that the technical operation to tokenize something is very easy. It can be literally done in a few clicks. It's very easy to interact with the Ethereum blockchain and to do it. But what is really interesting, and what provides the trust to the token, is all what is around it, the whole process. So it can start with the compliance officers at the bank, for instance, who will certify that the work of art is valid. It is the real work of art which is currently being tokenized. They can also certify that the work of art is safe in a safe at the bank or in any other art storage facility. Then the compliance officers will also check that the whole process is done with due diligence and in the proper way, and that the tokens, when created, are also handled in a secure way. And then the end of the chain also brings value, the custody of the tokens, which have to be done in a secured way, and this is exactly where CustoDigit is bringing value. It offers the sync at the end of the process to hold these tokens in a safe way. And this whole thing creates the value for the tokenization and the trust which goes with it for a client at the bank.
Okay, but one follow-up question. Does an art piece or some kind of object needs to be safely stored in some kind of vault? I now have the bank in mind, like some kind of art piece in the banking vault, or could the art piece also be in a museum, right? Because you would like to look at it, right? Or alternatively, from a museum's perspective, could a museum tokenize the art piece despite the image still hanging within the museum? Would this work, or is this somehow not possible?
Absolutely. I mean, everything is possible in this world. There is no fixed rules right now which provide best practices for all use cases. So whether the process involves holding the artwork in a safe is one thing. Maybe it can be also displayed. and tokenized. And then you can even probably imagine a use case where the museum will be able to delegate part of the voting rights for this work of art and open up for lending to other museums, for instance. So multiple use cases, no general best process, let's say.
Okay, maybe one side question here, because the art market is also prone to have fraud, money laundering going on and so on. So how can you avoid this to also comply with regulatory demands? Is it the bank operating here with their KYC procedures, or how do you make sure these tokens are not moved to, like shady countries, shady people somewhere on the world, and being used there for fraudy stuff? How can you assure this?
Actually, it's a really good question, right? If a bank or a regulated financial service provider is in the play itself, then they have to assure also AML or anti-terror financing. And luckily, to the technology behind on the Ethereum blockchain, you can actually define to which investors certain token can be transferred. Meaning you can do a proper KYC before you transfer the certain tokens to those investors. So meaning in the end, the obligation of doing the thoroughly checks on the AML, they still are with the banks, right? But there are ways to do it, and also the technology supports that you can actually define those processes properly.
Yeah, makes very much sense. Okay, very interesting.
Maybe just one thing in terms of that. I think also in terms of fraud, I mean, the amount of security and the amount of the fact that this is actually minted onto the blockchain and that you have a digital twin of this artwork actually decreases the possibility of being able to create a fraudulent copy of the artwork itself, especially in the case of NFTs and digital artwork itself. The security is actually increased considerably via tokenization, rather than it kind of becoming a kind of rather than it being decreased or being more of a risk for the bank itself, if you see what I mean. So I just wanted to maybe add that as well, that actually the tokenizing an asset in the art space is actually a benefit in terms of security.
Yes, and also traceability, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really traceable where it belongs to and what the different transactions were. So
exactly. In the real world with regular art, you don't really know who owns what, when something was owned, where did it move, and at what price it moved. So it results in something which is very opaque and very difficult to see through, not very transparent. Whereas on the blockchain, everything is traceable from the very minting of the token itself. You have the whole history of who owned it, how much did he pay for it, and this actually provides great benefits for the art business.
Okay, very interesting. So, but we are not talking yet about NFT, right? NFTs would be the digital art pieces which are emerging these days. First of all, let's talk about the traditional art market where you can really touch specific things, and therefore a question would now be: so why are we doing all this? What is the impact of tokenization, and how could this traditional art market, I have museums now in mind, I have a gallery in mind, I have art pieces in mind, but of course it goes much broader, also including other art pieces except images, but something to touch, right? So how will tokenization potentially transform the art market, and why actually are we doing all this? Where's the benefit?
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's we do have so many stakeholders in that ecosystem. Maybe we can even split them up, because yes. The benefits are really coming in different shapes and colors, right? I'm taking now the standpoint of a bank. Why is a bank, or what could be the potential benefits for a bank? At the moment, we do have art classified as a non-bankable asset class. So banks are not really into the play if we talk about the asset class of art. Maybe there's an exception with some funds which are out there, but then normally they are really expensive. So if we do a tokenization of art, the benefits a bank is getting, it's getting a bankable asset in the end, meaning a bank has a new asset class which they can advise and distribute to investors. Investors do have easy access to a new asset class, and thanks to fractionizing, also with different investment volumes. And another benefit for banks is as well, right, as it is a bankable asset, they can actually also collect assets under management. So they do have a much more holistic view on the assets under management from an end customer, and can also take it under assets under management. That's just a few of the benefits a bank is able to get if they are moving into that asset class. But you brought up also the benefits, right, for galleries, for example, from museums. I don't know, Julien, would you like to touch on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if a museum needs some liquidities, he can always open up what they have currently in display to also new investors and new owners. They can generate new publicity about it as well. They can generate new use cases for existing things which are sitting in the gallery. So they also have some new possibilities to exploit here. But I think that one of the key advantages as well of such tokenized artworks is also for very wealthy individuals who have a sentimental attachment to their paintings or sculptures, you name it, and they would like to be able to safeguard the inheritance of those artworks for their children in the future. And if they can divide the value, divide the ownership of such illiquid assets through tokens, it permits to avoid the liquidation and the selling of the art itself after they disappear. So for those, there is also a good use case concerning the tokenization of their own personal collection.
We have one question coming here from the audience, talking also about the Tesla stock, which has been tokenized now this week, apparently. So do you think that besides art pieces and art ownerships, also stocks of all types will be tokenized? So we see not just the Tesla stock, but all kinds of assets out there?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a great example for that. If you check the fund from Warren Buffett, the Berkshire Hathaway stock, the share A are priced at $120,000 a few years back. I don't know exactly how much it is today, but you can see that there is very little possibility for small investors to get into the stock. And that was the reason why they created a stock B for Berkshire Hathaway. So I think having more granularity and fractional shares is actually a great use case as well for the stock market. Yes.
Okay, excellent, interesting. And okay, but let's go back to the art topic, because this also is very, very interesting. So how is art operatively tokenized? So imagine I am a gallery, I'm having an art piece, I'm owning something. How can I do this? Do I need to transfer this art piece into a special purpose vehicle, like a special legal entity? Or am I selling this to the entire retail market in Europe? Or can I only sell this to friends and family people? So in case I'm having an art piece, what would you recommend me to do?
I would say, first of all, right, it depends on the regulatory and legal framework you are in. There we do have the benefit in Switzerland, and especially also in Liechtenstein, that actually a token is representing a right. And then, in fact, it would be like a contract you're having in the real world, where you have with that token a certain right, depending on the smart contract, how it is defined on that asset. But of course, then the issuance of those tokens, they really depend how and who is doing it. They come in different shapes. I mean, you can do just a peer-to-peer. where I'm, Philipp, sending you a part of my tokens and do it on a privately basis, then it's totally different than, for example, if we do that as a regulated entity. If it's a regulated entity, then you have the different challenges like who is actually assessing the value and the provenance of that art pieces, which you have to incorporate it then in the process as well.
And how long is this process taking? Is this a process which is really, as you previously said, a couple of clicks, or is this an endless process with lots of legal documents, lots of requirements to be fulfilled, lots of hurdles to be taken, and so on? Is this? I hope this question is easy to answer because, of course, it depends on the jurisdiction you're in.
David, you want to take this one, or?
Yeah, I think this, so on this particular area, it's not exactly my forte, but as you said, this is definitely dependent on the jurisdiction you're in. So in certain countries, you're going to have to sign across the authorization to be able to use this, to be able to change names on your art, as well as having the digital token. And in others, you'll be able to actually do it via purely digital, purely digital way. So basically, just using the tokenization method itself and changing online. But yeah, I'm no regulatory expert, unfortunately. So I'd have to. That's my colleagues.
One thing is for sure, though, is that it will be less costly and less complicated than the regular securitization process that you have to go through to create a new asset class in the regular, stock market and capital markets.
Yeah, but discussing this new type of asset class, how quickly would you expect this to develop? Do you think that, in 1 to 3 years, there is already, I don't know, 500 tokenized art pieces out there? Or will it develop more quickly, more slowly? It's extremely difficult to predict this, actually, right? But
I would say 500s are already out there worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So if you're speaking about digital art, then there's lots and lots and lots of digital pieces of art. So I think what we'll see is we'll probably see we don't have huge amounts of art marketplaces at this point in time, and I think probably what we'll see in the next 4 or 5 years is that there'll be much more art marketplaces being set up, which for exactly this process, basically. So there'll be kind of like central points for the tokenization of art, that will use systems like the ones that we've been creating to be able to easily tokenize art, and there'll be more open and secure marketplaces available for people to go to. So it won't be a kind of like I suppose systems being set up for an individual bank or for an individual client or whatever. It'll be more of an open marketplace that will be set up, and there'll probably be, I don't know, 4 or 5 of those, I would imagine, that would be available. So I think we'll probably see a bit of a change to that, and we already see that with digital art, but I think we're probably going to see that more with physical art as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, excellent. I think we always have to dissect digital art, which can develop more quickly, and physical art. So let's once again talk about physical art. How do you expect this market to grow? So in 2 years from now on, will we have 50 physical art pieces tokenized, or 500 or 5,000? I know this is extremely difficult to project, right? But any estimations?
I can give an estimation from my side. I believe it will be 5,000, at least in a 2 to 3 years time frame. Reason why is, right, the question with tokenization is always, what are the benefits out of the tokenization, and actually how can I realize those benefits? We talked before about already stocks which are traded. If I'm having a look, although we say that there are benefits, but the stock market is highly efficient right now in its own. But we do have a highly inefficient market for art. And they see that you can actually realize the benefits there relatively easily. So it's an edge case. right? From an operation, from a transparency, from a liquidity point of view, it's relatively easily to realize those benefits. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that we will see quite some progress in tokenization in that specific segment.
Okay, very interesting. And how would you also define the word art? You know, I typically have this image in mind, but do you have another definition of art and art market? You know, it could also be glass. You know, I'm not an artist, of course, you know, but there are art, decorational elements. You know, there could be things from churches which are 500 or 5,000 years old. You know, this could all be art, right? Including all the things which might be, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of years old. Would you include all this in the art market? Because if I think art, then I typically have this image in mind which hangs in a gallery, right? But of course, this is not enough.
So maybe in terms of so I think there's a bit of crossover between real estate and art as well. So we already have the tokenization of real estate. That's also something that has been around for quite a long time. How do we tokenize real estate? How do we do things like creating securities out of buildings so that we can get more investment, for example, in buildings itself? I can imagine that for historic real estate that has pieces of art involved in the actual church or building itself, that you might even find that you would have a kind of like special triggers to be able to say, okay, well, this is actually a piece of art that we want to be able to separate off on a kind of more like a real estate token, and then also sell this piece of art also as a kind of like separate token itself. So I can kind of see that as maybe almost kind of like a separate kind of like separate tokenization system in a weird way. And then I think with other pieces of art, so obviously you have some pieces of art which are very contained. So maybe, I don't know, ceramics or as you said, like maybe glass or steel work, for example. And that you could do in the same way. So it'd be exactly the same. It would either stay in a gallery, it would stay in a safe, and that would work in exactly the same way. But then you have other pieces of art which are maybe like much more about installation, so like art installations. How do you tokenize an art installation? And that's where things are probably going to get a little bit more creative, I would imagine. But that, I suppose, it'll be kind of like we'll have to see on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely. Well, case by case sounds good, but it's of course then also leaving like the standard product, right? So you also would like to have, in terms of a market, you would also like to have standardized art pieces. And if so, then this would be like the traditional image hanging somewhere. Is this right?
Yeah, exactly. So for a traditional piece of art, so like a painting, that's exactly it. It would be where the image is actually hung in the gallery, for example, or whether it's or kept in the safe in the bank, for example, or even in the owner's home.
If I'm not mistaken, it's called the collectibles, right? All these different groups, art, wine, and ceramic even. And I would say the challenges are mostly the same for all these different subsets of assets in it. So that the physical storage you need to have at some point, you need to actually evaluate the right pricing for it. That's the main challenges I see for this asset group in general.
I think this was a very helpful comment, dividing between art and collectibles. Okay, what are the participants in the art market, and how would they benefit from it? What are their opportunities? We talked about galleries, for example. We talked about, of course, the artists and investors. Who else is there?
I mean, the funds and the institutional clients, they're searching for ways to diversify their portfolios and invest thematically in art, for instance. In art vehicles could be a way to diversify the portfolio and to get exposure to new products. They can also leverage their tokenized art as collateral to do lending, etc. I mean, it's not only for the art players themselves, but also for the investors, and investors are also represented by funds and more institutional clients, and not only by wealthy individuals. So I think it also provides value here, diversification and what you can do with your new liquidity.
Okay. Anybody want to add something?
And it opens up, right, also this asset class or the market itself to a broader group of investors. Thanks to fractionizing, you don't need to actually pay 10 million to own a Picasso. You can actually also own just a part of it with a couple of thousand francs, for example. So it's making it more accessible, the asset class in general.
Okay, I think this makes very much sense. Okay, excellent. So I think we talked already about why we would like to tokenize art. Would you like to add something on this? Maybe David or Peter, would you like to add something about the fractionalization, where it can lead us in terms of investments?
I suppose.
Go ahead, David.
Okay,
No,
I suppose, yeah. So I suppose in terms of investments, I think that the the open market on art can be increased through this fractionalization. So the ability to be able to actually fractionalize a physical object like art and then have that being invested on means that artists can easily get investment for their products. So in that way, I suppose it's the we focus more on how this this affects the like investment banks or the end investors. But if you think about modern art rather than fine art, it's actually beneficial for the artists as well, because they can put their art onto the open market so that they're going to be able to get more investors in their art and be able to sell their artworks at a greater price as well. So rather than selling their art, maybe if you sell it to one investor, then you maybe get, I don't know, 10,000 euros, for example, for a piece of art. If you sell it in small chunks, then maybe you're going to get a little bit more of a markup, because each of those you would be able to sell for a little bit more. So I think in the end, it kind of benefits everybody in the end, because it gives, as you said previously, access to more people to be able to buy art and get involved in this. And then it gives more, it opens up a completely new marketplace to the artists themselves as well. So I suppose that's the only thing that I maybe wanted to add on that.
Good point. Did you already talk to investors who would basically be happy to invest in fractional art, or maybe even set up an art fund? Are investors already thinking in this direction, or would we have to wait a little bit longer until they are also understand these kinds of assets?
I would say that the asset is understood quite good, especially from the more institutional or ultra high net worth individual kind of investors. There were investments maybe more on a private basis into arts quite heavily. What it's opening, right, is also the possibility to have more investors-oriented view on it, especially with the fractionizing. You have the possibility to actually diversify your investments easier than before. If you have been doing it before, then you would need to invest in a specific art fund, which is doable. There are a couple out there in the market, but they are normally relatively expensive. And now you would have actually the opportunity to do direct investments in the underlying asset class, and at the same time do a diversification of your investments with limited amount of investments you have to do. So it's much easier than before.
Okay, I think that's a very good point. We have also one question coming from the audience about the custody topic once again. How does this actually work? Do you need to have a special wallet, or could you also store the Ethereum token on your self-custody wallet from MetaMask over to other solutions? How does this work?
So I take that from a custody perspective, as we are providing a digital asset platform, right? Yes, of course, you could do that also with MetaMask, with this kind of application. And they are supporting the ERC standard from MetaMask. We believe, but also that, for example, custody providers or digital asset providers, that they have the ability, as we do have, to actually store those values. In our case, the project GFT and CastoDigit are doing it. It's an ERC 20 right now, an ERC 1400 later on. And our digital asset platform is able to store those ERCs as well. Then it would be just in the wallet for this specific asset class.
Yeah. And Peter, a follow-up question from the audience: how would the pricing be? How do you get all the infrastructure, the regulatory topic, and so on? This costs really a lot of money, and of course this needs to be reimbursed. How do you get this into the price? Is then the sum of all the tokens a little bit more expensive or having a little bit more value when comparing it to the simple art piece? How would this work? Or is there a transaction fee happening?
So in our case, right, it's up to the issuer in the end, how he defines the contract and the product in the end. What I'm expecting how the market would go, it would really become a financial instrument, meaning you would have certain components which will come on top of the painting itself. So you would have a deposit, a fee, you would have a calculation agent fee, and so on. So in the end, yes, in my opinion, it's a bit more expensive than just owning the physical art piece, but you get also additional possibilities and services on top.
I think this makes also very much sense. Okay, let's move on, talking very soon also about the NFT topic. So do you think that people who are holding art pieces in the future are simply tokenizing them basically to liquidate them, or to at least in parts liquidate them, or would they like to keep ownership of their art? Maybe a tokenization is also a tool for basically liquidating the art piece. Of course, then you need to do something with the money in times where we are in fear of inflation. That's not easy. But why do you see investors, or no, put it differently, why do you holders seeing tokenizing or wishing to tokenize their assets? Is it the liquidation topic, or is it the fractionalization topic once again?
I think it's virtualization. I don't see it as liquidation. I think it's just having new ways to represent the underlying asset.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify this. We talked about the benefits, but I thought going this deep would also be interesting. And what's the role of banks? Of course, with banks, you do have regulated entities. They need to ensure KYC processes. They might also need to ensure custody processes and so on. But for the future, I myself thought, like blockchain could also be very interesting for a bank, because in the future, the bank is not just storing money and securities. The bank might in the future also store art pieces, real estate, I don't know, cars, collectibles, all kinds of assets, and then broadening the custody services throughout all kinds of asset classes. When I explained this 1 year ago in a presentation, then I thought, okay, this might be a little bit too much in the future. But do we see this happening very slowly right now, such that banks are expanding their custody services once you have more assets being tokenized? Is this happening, or is this just a PowerPoint statement from me last year?
I think it's completely true. I mean, all the clients, they are also looking to have a holistic asset overview about everything they own, right? Whether it is for regulatory purposes or because they are obliged to do so, having a single view about all your possessions and having this in an aggregated form is very beneficial and is also a requirement for some clients. And I think that integrating these illiquid assets into the asset statement can also bring value to the end client for sure.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
And in addition to that, right, it's also in the interest of banks, as you mentioned before, because with that, they could actually get more assets under management. Before, it was an asset class which was not bankable at all, so it was outside of the banking or the financial system. And thanks to tokenization, we are now bringing it into the financial system as a new asset class, where a bank can also then generate new service or additional service fees from it.
I think this is interesting and also good news for banks that there are very significant room to expand business. I would also, if this is okay, touch a little bit upon the technology for a couple of minutes. Maybe Julian, maybe you are the best person here to also help us understand some more details here. Please tell us what kind of blockchains are best to use here. We already talked about Ethereum a little. Are there alternatives? What about the gas fees? Of course, right now they are high. They might go down in the midterm future. What kind of standard token standards are applying, which could be used, and generally about the infrastructure? Maybe you could give us some insights into the tech stack.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what we see today is very clear. Ethereum is the king on the tokenization aspects, but it depends also on the use case for the bank or the client, right? Maybe they are more interested in privacy topics. And in that case, maybe they want to work rather in a consortium with other banks on a private blockchain. This is also something which is completely possible. So it depends on the use case, basically. But on the tokenization aspect, I would say that Ethereum is by a very wide margin the most popular choice to issue new tokens. And this is due to several factors. It can be due to the fact that it is very widely used, and as such, it is trustable, it is trusted. There are standards which are present and which are trusted as well and audited. But as you said, being the most popular one, it also brings some issues, and it suffers a bit from its success. We have congestion in the transaction throughput. We have very high fees due to that. It's mainly driven by the DeFi space, for instance. But we also see a lot of efforts which are being made by the Ethereum community to solve these issues. We had the Berlin upgrade this morning. In fact, I followed up on YouTube live. And we have London, which is coming also during the summer. We have the transition to the POS, to the proof of stake. We have also the layer 2 solutions, which are bringing more scalability. So there are a multitude of factors which are giving a lot of hope for the Ethereum network to scale in a better way. If you don't have the time, you can always see what's happening in copycats blockchains. Binance Smart Chain has made a lot of noise recently because it is less expensive, it is faster, but we all know where the innovation is coming from, and this is coming from the Ethereum network and Ethereum community. So I would advise to stay on Ethereum.
Okay.
Maybe from my side, I'd also say that Cardano is also, I mean, it's very green at this point in time, but Cardano is somewhere which looks like it's going to have a big impact in general on the kind of like public area, and also Hedera as well. So the Hedera tokenization engine is also probably going to have a fairly big impact again, because they already have that. I think it went live maybe about a month ago or so, maybe a couple of months ago. And that will probably have a big impact again on the tokenization engine, because of the, as you said, Julian, quite rightly, is they have these the issues with high fees and under control. So there's no real, there's more scalable than the Ethereum blockchain at this point in time. But yeah, so those are maybe just two other technologies to keep a lookout for.
And I will even provide you with another one. The Tezos blockchain is really trying to also push this clean tokenization narrative. And as such, they are, of course, leveraging a proof of stake consensus as well. But they are really trying to push this image of being a responsible choice and a green choice regarding tokenization.
Okay. What I think is also a very interesting driver is, in case you are getting cash on the chain, think the Swiss franc, the US dollar, and so on. such that you can basically pay with pay the tokens directly without needing to onboard money before you are paying them. I think this is interesting because we see this in the NFT space, where the NFT is being provided after I have paid for it in Ethereum, right? So this kind of pay versus order is very nicely working in the NFT area with Ethereum as a, let's call it, currency. And I think for the existing world of art tokenization, it would be required to also have like an existing currency on chain. This could also be a driver of increased innovation and adoption. But let's talk a little bit also about NFTs. So what is an NFT? Maybe Julian once again, and David, what is an NFT? How does it basically work? And why do we see this uprise and this this feeling that it's a hype? Why do we see this happening right now? So where does this dynamic actually coming from?
All right, so I would say that the main standard for the NFTs is ERC 720. It's the main 721. It's the main standard for the NFTs, and an NFT is basically a non-fungible token, which is unique. You are creating a single token that represents an underlying element. It can be a piece of digital art. It can be a collectible. It can be a lot of different things. But the main thing is that it is properly unique. It cannot be mixed with other ones. For instance, if I put 100 coins of €1 into a jar and I mix them, you will not be able to find the one I put inside. But if I do it with 100 different paintings, then you will probably be able to find the painting I have put inside. So this is the main difference. It permits to link an asset to a single token, and having the ownership of this token, which is completely transparent and demonstrable on the blockchain, means that you have the ownership of the underlying assets. So you might ask, why would I want to have an NFT, right? Why do I want to pay for it? Well, if you Google at the moment Da Vinci's Gioconda, you can see the image, but that doesn't mean that you own it. And this is the main difference. If you want to own the piece of art which was created by the artist, you can represent it by owning the NFT. And this opens up tons of possibilities for all the artists which are in the digital space at the moment and which are basically creating new ways of expressing themselves through, JPEGs, through GIFs, through whatever you want to call it, every support which is digital. And previously they struggled to find new ways to sell their art because it's reproducible, it's copyable very easily. And as such, they struggle to make a living out of it. The NFTs are providing them with a clean and easy way to monetize their creations and to sell them to people who are interested. And you were a bit focusing on the older, let's say, art world, the physical art world. But today we are all spending 10, 12, 15 hours a day on a computer or on our phones. Then what is exactly the real world, Maybe I want to collect now posters and paintings on my computer, and contemplating this collection on my computer maybe represents more value to me than to owning the physical part that I would show in my apartment. So it's a matter of perspective. I think that in the last 50 to 60 years, we have saw the border between the digital world and the real world became a bit more blurry. And then you can start to wonder, is it that strange to want to own art which is digital and which is on my computer? I don't think it's that much strange nowadays.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Anybody wants to add something on the hype around NFTs?
No, not really. I think that maybe, I suppose just the hype around this. I think that a lot of the hype has come from very much a lot of music and video artists wanting to be able to digitize their art, and being able to use the NFTs as a way of making their art more available. and they're also very good at promoting themselves in general, because obviously, music artists and digital and video artists in general are quite good at promoting themselves and marketing themselves in general. So I think that we've got a lot of hype around NFTs, and just because of the type of digital art that is generally being used for. But I think we're going to see it kind of just becoming a bit more normal in the future, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree here, actually. I would not say that we have an hype with Bitcoin right now, like given the demand and the supply profile, Bitcoin is actually fairly priced. That's my personal opinion. I know that some people are now rolling their eyes, but that's my opinion. But with NFT, actually, I would now think that there is a little bit of an hype going on, because we have a couple of millions now being transacted in NFTs and being issued as NFTs. And it's really difficult to understand, but maybe I'm also too old. It's really difficult to understand what people are really doing with these NFTs instead of just collecting them. Therefore, with NFT, it's fascinating. I think demand will come, but right now I would really say that it's a hype going on. But interestingly, we are always talking about art, but at the end of the day, it's about intellectual property, right? Because intellectual property can also be a song, could be a photo, could be a painting, could be like some item in a computer game. It's always about IP, and therefore I think it's really fascinating from this perspective, thinking that NFT is not just art, right? It's about somehow getting IP in terms of intellectual property, which has been produced by people on chain. Did you also think about in this direction? Like being a little bit more generic, not just focusing on the art aspect of NFT?
Absolutely, yes. And I can provide you with a couple of use cases which are exactly linked to the IP. For instance, the secondary market for games, for video games, which are a huge markets worldwide, can leverage NFTs because there is this resale royalty that can be automatically applied to NFTs, which each subsequent sale, part of the price is being directly sent to the initial minter of the NFT. So if you, for instance, it can be applied for an artist because he creates his work of art, he sells it, and then with each subsequent sales, the artist gets rewarded as well. And this also provides him with a hedge concerning the price movement of his artwork. If I am a young artist, I do today something which costs 100 euro, I have 100 euro. But what in 10 years when it will maybe be priced at 10,000, I will not get any of it. But with this system, I will get at least 10% of this new valuation. Same for the video games or for any secondary market. The software company which have created this game or this new NFT can also be rewarded afterwards when I sell it again to one of my friends or whatever. And this provides value to everyone because this provides value to the creator of the NFT or the game. This provides value to also the buyer, the user, because then he can sell it again to somebody else. And this provides really good value for the whole ecosystem.
Maybe one point which I wanted to make, it's actually back to your comment, Philipp, before with the stable coins, right? And I guess that's also reflecting then to digital NFTs. With having Ethereum as the payment, with having all the raised digital, we do have already a relative efficient market infrastructure in place. Maybe a little bit exceptional is the secondary market itself, but even there you do have the first kind of at least non-regulated secondary markets or billboards. But I wanted to say maybe on the demand side we see right now a little bit of a boom, but in general it's also due to the fact that it's quite efficient and easy to do. If we compare it with physical arts, the process itself, although it's getting digitized or tokenized, it's much easier in comparison. And stable coins, in my opinion, not only having having stable coins in that environment is helping a lot for the adoption there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And within the NFTs, it does work. You have stable coins, the Tether project, right? You also could pay in Ether. And therefore we see that like pure native digital plays, yeah, Ether plus NFTs really work with a higher degree of dynamic in comparison to tokenization touchable assets, right? I think that's a very interesting observation. Yeah, I think let's close down this round. Would you like to make a closing note, Peter, maybe, or David?
Just thank you from my side, right? Thank you very much for this interesting discussion.
Yes.
From my side.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure speaking with all of you.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
was a pleasure. It was really interesting to talk 1 hour in depth about all these topics, starting with the very basics and then going as deep as NFTs and various token standards. At the end of the day, I think we can conclude it is a hot topic. It stays dynamic. It is dynamic. Blockchain stuff will go on. And I think it really makes sense for everybody to get a little bit into blockchain topics, you know, being it a programmer, a business guy, being it the artist, the investor, and so on. There is so much to get for everybody. And I'm very surprised that some people still ignore it entirely. But now after Coinbase yesterday, I think now I feel that the establishment is really waking up. I got some emails today that people want to now get crypto assets explained in detail once again. So therefore, I think we will really have some amazing years and months ahead of us with all the stuff which is going on, and also especially with the topic of tokenization.